Hey guys, JD Phillips here from the Appalachian Storyteller, and I'm glad to be here with you today on the Appalachia channel, where I'm thrilled to share some of my favorite all-time stories with you. Our first story takes place in West Virginia, where the governor was on a routine visit to the state prison when he saw something in a certain prisoner's eyes that he just couldn't seem to get out of his head. There was something about those eyes. Later that night, a mysterious woman steps into the governor's office with a trembling voice and a secret that would soon change everything. Outside of his window, the sun had set, and now Governor John Holbrook sat alone in his office, watching the shadows dance across the wall. His private secretary had gone for the day, and the few remaining office workers were busy making their way to the parking lots. The governor was tired and weary from another long, hard day's work in West Virginia politics, and now he could finally lean back lazily in his chair and soak in the silence that surrounded him. As his mind reflected back on the day's events, he thought of those eyes again. He couldn't seem to get them out of his head. Earlier that day, the governor had been over to the state penitentiary, and as he made his way through its gloomy walls, he happened upon a convict being led back to his cell by a couple of stout guards. The convict was defiant. He had just been given a good thrashing, and as he slouched along, suddenly the governor stopped him. For some strange reason, he was attracted by the criminal's face, and he proceeded to ask the man what the trouble was. "None of your damn business," growled the young man sullenly. "Boy, you best shut your mouth, you fool. That's the governor you're talking to. Now show some respect," said one of the guards. "If you backsass him again, we'll take you back there and give you a little more old hickory to help you get your mind right." "I don't care if he's the governor. I don't expect nothing from him. I don't need no favors from him or nobody else. Let me go to my cell." In that moment, the prisoner was taken back to the narrow den that was to be his home for the term of his natural life. And as the heavy iron door was clanged shut, the governor stood there for a moment, looking curiously after the convict. "Well, who is that man? What's he in here for?" "His name's Jim Smith. He's up from Greenbrier County. Murder. Yep, he's a lifer," responded the guard. "He's a tough nut. Ain't even 30 years old yet, but he was always in trouble till he got in here. I'm from Greenbrier myself, and I know him. Yes, sirree. He's a bad egg. Killed his daddy. And that old man, well, he was a hard case too. Word is they got into some sort of family ruckus, and the first thing Jim done was to shoot his paw. Now the jury would have hung Jim, but his daddy was such an afeared and mean man that they thought Jim ought to be allowed something for ridding the county of him. So they gave Jim a life term." That was all that had occurred, but the governor had taken a good look at the prisoner's face. For some reason, he was sure it had been a fine face once upon a time, and even now, it wasn't wholly bad. If he would drop that look of defiance, it would be a very good-looking face indeed. And those eyes, certainly, thought the governor. He had seen those eyes before. He racked his brains, thinking about them all day, and somehow, out of the dim, misty memories of childhood, his mind drifted back to those hills of East Tennessee where he had spent his youth. There appeared a pair of eyes, strangely like the ones of the convict. It was strange, but all of a sudden, he couldn't help but thinking of an old apple tree in full bloom and a white face with those eyes, but he couldn't make sense of it all. Just then, there was a timid knock at the door, and the figure of a frail-looking old woman entered through the doorway, slowly, like she was half afraid to do so. "It's after office hours, ma'am. You'll have to come back tomorrow."
Well, yes, sir. I understand. It's just, I've been trying to see the governor for 3 days now. And every time I'm here, he's been too busy. Well, anyways, I'm sorry to bother you, sir. I'll come back again tomorrow.
Just as she started to go, a ray of light from the hallway flashed into the office, and on her withered face, there were those eyes again, and the visions of apple blossoms. Well, wait a minute, ma'am. I'm the governor. It's just that it's unusual to attend to business at this time of the evening, but come in for a moment, and I'll make an exception in your case. What is it you wish?
You're the governor?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Please tell me what I can do for you. The woman unrolled a grimy paper and handed it to him, and in the dim light, the governor could see that it was a petition for a pardon. And as he strained his eyes over it in the twilight, the poor little woman in the rusty dress sat with clenched hands and wildly beating heart, waiting breathlessly. Well, let me see here. Jim Smith, Greenbrier County, convicted of murder. There's not many names on this petition. On what grounds do you base this claim to executive clemency? From all I've heard, this case is a particularly horrible one. The man killed his father. And, moreover, Smith is a man of bad reputation in the county which he came from.
It's not so. It's Villar. He's always been good to me. And the man he killed was not his father. He was his stepfather. And that wasn't shown at the trial. You see, we didn't have no money to get a lawyer, but my boy Jim was always kind to me. And the truth is, he's all I've got left but my happy days before I married that drunken brute. Please, Governor, my boy Jim is all I have in this world.
Well, I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see that this is a case that I can interfere. There's no showing made of extenuating circumstances.
No extenuating circumstances? My God, if you want to know of extenuating circumstances, well, I'll tell you of them. I killed that man myself, and my boy Jim just lied and said he did it to save me. That man was beating me, like he always did when he was drunk. And, in desperation, I snatched up the pistol. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted to hurt him, and made him leave me alone. He was about to hit me again with a stick, when I closed my eyes and I fired. When my boy Jim came in and saw what I'd done, he went and gave himself up, and he told me that if I said a word about his not doing it, he would kill himself. I was afraid. Please, you have to understand.
You say Jim was not the son of the man he killed? Then whose son was he?
I can't tell you. When I was a girl, I lived in Tennessee, and I was pretty then. Everyone said so. But anyhow, that don't really matter now. But before the war, when I was still young, I had a sweetheart. He was a poor boy named John, and he worked on an old farm near where we lived. He didn't have any family since all his people had died, and when that war broke out, he went to fight, and he promised me that he would come back for me, and I trusted him and believed him. Yet I never saw him again, but I still remember well the night he went away. It was in the springtime, and we sat in the grass underneath the old apple tree down in the orchard.
As the governor listened to the woman's word, a sudden chill ran down his spine, and his teeth chattered a little bit.
Yes, I remember it very well. And the apple blossoms were on the ground, all around us, and he pulled several of them, and he put them in my hair and on my dress, and he said my eyes were the most beautiful that he had ever seen. Well, after he went away, I never heard from him again. He must have been killed during the war. But that winter, I gave birth to my baby boy, Jim, and a few months later, I met that brute, the one that's dead. But he wasn't bad to me at first, and before long, I married the man. He thought I was a widow, and the truth is, in the sight of God, I was, since John was surely dead. Anyhow, after I married this man, he changed. He was mean and shiftless. He was cruel to me, and he beat me. And somehow, he found out about my boy Jim, After that, he was even worse than ever, and my life was awful. My boy Jim was good to me, and he kept us up. Every cent he made, he gave to me, and he comforted me, and he never said an unkind word to me in his life. And if I don't get him out, I'll die. I'll die, I tell you. I don't care to live without him. Please, sir, turn him loose, and let me have just a little happiness in this life. I don't have much more left, and all I have now is nothing but sorrow. Let a little brightness come back to me. Please, I'm begging you.
There was a long silence. The governor thought of those eyes, and the moonlight, and the upturned, trusting face, and those apple blossoms. So long ago. Across his desk, the woman had broken down and was weeping silently, and the governor's eyes were full of tears. At last, he broke the silence, and from his pocket, he pulled a wallet, and he took a pile of bills from it. "Ma'am, here's some money, a few $100s. It'll keep you and Jim for a while. And if you'll present yourself at the prison tomorrow at 12 o'clock, your boy will be turned over to you, pardoned, on the condition that you both take the first train and leave West Virginia, where you've seen so much sorrow. The money I've given you will pay your railroad fare and keep you and Jim until he can get some work. I'd do this for the sake of your dead John. But please, don't come back here to thank me tomorrow, for I can't see you again. Good night and goodbye." And as the woman left the office, with a heart too full of happiness to put into mere words, she looked back and she saw in the twilight shadows the governor lean forward as though in utter weariness. He pillowed his head upon the arms of his broad desk. The rest of that night, she couldn't sleep for joy, nor could the governor sleep. In his mind, he kept thinking about the moonlit night, those eyes which he couldn't forget, and the ground strewn with the petals of apple blossoms. It was only a small morsel of comfort to know that she believed him to be dead.
Wow, what a powerful story. There's certainly a lot to unpack there. Was the governor right in his actions? Or perhaps he should have revealed his true identity to the woman. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Our next story was born out of a mysterious email I received from a man in North Carolina, which had a picture of 3 young girls, triplets, in front of a log cabin. With a caption on the photo, he said, "Can you tell my great-grandmother's story?" With nothing more to go on, I began to research down a rabbit hole that soon would become the true story of Essie, Desi, and Bessie. I hope you enjoy.
In the open doorway of the ancient weathered log cabin, far up the slopes of Sugarloaf Mountain, stood a rugged mountain man with a stout frame, clad in typical overalls attire. Thomas Edward Justice, simply known in the little world of Edneyville as Big Tom. Now, Tom was innocent of all book learning and void of any license to operate a business in the state of North Carolina. But the Hill folks knew that they could count on him at the farmer's market every Saturday for a wagon load of fresh vegetables. It had been that way for the past 20 years, as Big Tom peddled his Irish taters, corn, and apples. Depending on the time of year, he might even have some fresh strawberries or chestnuts. But one thing's for sure, he'd be at that market with something to sell each and every week. Today was a busy day for Big Tom since it was Friday. There was so much to do. He took note of the fresh new buds springing to life on the maple trees, This was exactly what he'd been hoping for. Indeed, the weather was finally taking a turn for the better. Gone were the long, cold, hard days of winter, and renewed were the hopes of the longer days and bountiful crops to come. With that in mind, Tom wasted no time hooking up the plow to his faithful mule, Earl. "Well, Earl, it's time me and you get back at it, old boy, and start turning this dirt over," he said as he gently rubbed the animal's neck like he was a blood family member. Inside of the primitive cabin, his wife Effie was busy preparing strips of hog in the cast iron kettle while making cornbread on a flat griddle held over the open flame of the fireplace. By now, all the kids were starting to stir, and what a passel of young'uns it was. 7 boys and 4 girls. But the way folks figured back then, you needed a fine crop of young'uns to help ease the workload of taking care of the fields and the animals. And, wouldn't you know it, it looked like the Justice family was about to be blessed again by the good Lord, since it was plain for anyone to see that Effie was very pregnant. So much so that they had sent for the granny woman yesterday, because the baby, they were likely to make their grand entrance into this world any minute. Sure enough, by noon that day, the mountain doctor galloped to the Justice homestead with a saddlebag full of the latest medicine that she had harvested from the hills and the hollers. And she wasn't a moment too soon, as Effie was in the full throes of labor. Now, back in those days, babies in the spring were just a natural order of things, and menfolk didn't do all the pacing the floors and fretting and worrying like they do now. No, sir. They went right ahead, tending to their business. So it was no surprise that Big Tom and Earl never broke stride out in the fields, while Effie was giving birth inside the cabin. The farmer looked up and he saw his eldest boy, Tom Jr., running towards him. "Paul, we got a baby girl." The mountaineer gave a brief nod of understanding to his son. Well, how about that? Another gal to help out around the house, he thought to himself. Well, directly, about 30 minutes later, Junior came running across the field again. "Paul, we got another baby girl." Big Tom nodded again and casually thought to himself, "Well, I reckon I'll break ground on a couple more rows this year. The good Lord knows we'll need the extra food." And lo and behold, it weren't nary 15 minutes later when Big Tom looked up and saw his boy running towards the field, yet again, with his arms flailing away. "Paul, there's another one!" "What in tarnation is going on in there?" the old man yelled out as he dropped his plow and took off running towards the cabin. He had to make sure there weren't any more gals about to be born today. And so it was. The Justice household was now bursting at the seams, with 7 boys and 7 girls. Now, folks around these parts had heard tales of twins before, but triplets, that was plumb unheard of on Sugarloaf. And by the next day, wagging tongues had spread the news up and down Wolf Creek and clear across Jude's Gap. Over the next week, a steady stream of kinfolks and curious alike visited the Justice homestead to see the famous triplets with their own eyes. When Uncle Bob Freeman first saw the girls, he asked the obvious question, "Well, Big Tom, what you gonna name 'em?" "Well, I don't rightly know. It's hard to tell 'em apart." Uncle Bob pointed at the girl who had been born first and said, "Why don't you name that one there after my wife Bessie? And since they look so much alike, it's only sensible to make their names rhyme. How about Essie, Bessie, and Desi?" And just like that, the triplets had their legal names. From that moment on, Essie, Bessie, and Desi were inseparable. Effie made all their clothes and dressed them identical. And as they grew, they were the pride and joy of Big Tom. He took the girls to baby contests down in the valley, where all 3 of these pretty girls would cause a spectacle rarely seen in the mountains. Folks would come from all over to see the famous Justice girls, and they were showered with all the free ice cream that they could eat each time they went to town. Back home, they worked just like all the other kids. Each girl helped out with the household chores, tending to the animals and were even paid 10 cents a day to work the potato and the corn fields. A few months out of the year, all the children of Sugarloaf Mountain would attend the Shepherd one-room schoolhouse. It was here that Essie, Bessie, and Desi were given the nicknames of Boots, Shoes, and Leggins by their classmates. The girls were model children as long as their parents were around, but it was well known that they loved to rip and run just like all their siblings. They got into every bit of mischief possible, climbing trees and fences. But the most fun they had was going to school during the winter. You see, the road they walked had a large overhanging cliff that water cascaded down, which created an icicle wonderland during the cold months. The triplets would battle their brothers and their sisters and their classmates in epic wars with these huge chunks of ice, fiercely fighting as a team. Yet, at the same time, each Sunday, the girls would be on their best behavior in their pretty dresses, sitting between Effie and Big Tom, and even sung in the church choir. The biggest day of the year at the Justice House was the triplets' birthday. It would be planned for months in advance, with the entire community celebrating it with the family. Yes, sir, these were simple times back then, but the Justice triplets always said that these were some of the best memories of their life. They always had food, and they were surrounded by loving, hard-working parents. Yet, time marches on. By 1920, both Essie and Bessie were 17 years old and married. Desi soon followed. Just like that, the triplets started out on their own individual journeys. However, the seeds that were planted by their parents during their childhood proved to be lasting for them, and they would go on and live long, healthy lives, running successful businesses, surrounded by a passel of children of their own and scores of grandchildren. Their birthdays continued to be spectacles for the rest of their lives, with newspapers across America celebrating each one. Even President Ronald Reagan would write them to celebrate their special day. Desi died in 1986 at 82 years old. Bessie followed in 1988 at 84 years old. And by 1998, the last of the triplets, Essie, died at 93 years old. Ironically, the spirit of Essie, Bessie, and Desi still lives on today. Take a look at this photo from their 80th birthday. You see those babies in their laps? Those are their great-grand-nieces, who are now known as the famous Hinkle triplets. So, my friend, now you know the rest of the story on Essie, Bessie, and Desi, the famous Justice triplets of Appalachia.
What a great story. Truly inspirational. Stay tuned. There's plenty more stories on the way. What if the one thing you dreamed of the most in this world came wrapped in disappointment? Well, in a holler below Pickles Gap, a mountain girl named Annie wanted just one thing, a pink dress. And what she got instead will break your heart.
The small, run-down cabin stood at the base of Pickles Gap. The yard featured a few feeble attempts at flower beds, while a teenage girl named Annie was busy hanging an old brown dress, a pair of overalls, and a few old shirts on a clothesline that was strung between two oak trees. Sitting on a split-bottom chair on the front porch was her brother, whittling on a stick and chewing on a stem of an old corncob pipe, as he casually admired seeing his sister work so hard.
Why, ain't you gonna help me, Rex?
No, it ain't a man's job to be a foolin' with the washing.
It ain't no man's job to do nothing. It's us women folks that has to do all the washing and the running after the cows and the churning and the cooking and the minding the baby. It appears to me that the only job a man has is eating 3 meals a day.
That's plumb foolishness, Annie. Bud has a carpenter's job up at the new hotel, and he's making a heap of money, might nigh $1 a day, too.
You call that work? He gets to lay off every rainy day and play checkers around the store. While rain or shine, me and sister and Mom, we chop the wood and do the churning and the cooking, and the hoeing, and all the rest of the work, too.
But Pa does the plowing for you.
You mean that he walks behind the mule who's doing the plowing. And when the mule is done plowing and winter comes, all Pa does is sit around and wait for spring. And what has Pa been doing all spring? Sitting around waiting for summer. And what's Pa doing all summer? Oh, it's terrible hard work. He drives them sleepy old mules down to the station and sits around waiting for the train. And then he drives all the summer folks up to the hotel and sits around the store until it's supper time. Yeah, that's terrible hard work that Pa is doing.
Pa works aplenty. Besides, what's women folks meant for if it ain't to work for their men folks? Annie put a basket of clothes down and walked towards Rex.
Well, they was meant to be beautiful and charming and looked up to by their men folks.
Beautiful? Now ain't that a joke? Rex replied as he began to laugh.
Well, what chance does Ma ever have to spruce herself up? All the time she's a-working for Pa. And us children, with no time for herself and no money to buy clothes or anything.
Women? Beautiful? Cal, you need to take a peep at yourself in the looking glass.
Well, how can I help it? I ain't never had a new dress in all my life. It's always an old dress that Ma made for sis, and when it's wore out, it's passed down to me. And it's always calico, 'cause calico's cheap, and it's brown, because brown don't show dirt, and it's always got patches to hide the holes. And truth be told, there ain't nary a color that I hate more than brown. I tell you right now, there ain't a single thing in this world that I crave more than a new pink dress.
Annie put her hand over her heart and continued.
Why, I think pink is the most beautifulest of colors. Sometimes it hurts me here not to see pink.
Law, Annie, you ain't talking sense at all.
Well, I crave for me a dress like the one that beautiful summer lady had on, just like the one she had on yesterday evening when I toted the eggs up to the Oliver Springs Hotel. I've never wanted a dress more than that one that lady was wearing. It was beautiful, I tell you.
Just then, the mother opened the screen door and walked out on the porch, carrying a baby on her hip. Annie, ain't you finished with them clothes yet?
No, Ma, I haven't quite finished.
Rex, hold the baby for a few minutes and give your ma's aching bones a rest for a spell. The mountain boy reluctantly got up and mumbled, "It ain't no man's job to be holding no baby." But he made sure he didn't say it loud enough for his ma to hear it, else she would have blistered his hide. "Annie, this Sunday is decoration day down at the church, and everyone's going to be there fixing up their graves. I want you to put on your best dress."
Ma, that's just it. I ain't got nothing but that old brown calico dress with a big old patch in it.
"Well, I reckon we'll have to get something fixed up for you. It wouldn't do for you to go there all shabby like when you got 2 brand new graves to decorate. Why, the grass ain't even growed over your Aunt Liza's grave yet."
Ma, do you reckon I can have a new dress? Maybe even a pink one.
"Gal, what's gotten into you, Annie? Don't you know that your pa don't make enough to halfway feed the 6 of you'uns, let alone buy some new clothes? And he's done spent pert near all of his June savings on drinks already."
Yes, Ma.
"Anyway, I want you to wear that dark blue dress that I bought brand new for you when Rex was born. Your sister wore it once last year, afore she was spliced, and she looked right swell in it. But you sure have to have something, 'cause you're getting growed up, and it's time you spruced yourself up and started a sparkling for those men folks."
Ma, I don't want to see no man.
"Well, don't be no fool, Annie. You're pert near 16 years old, plenty old enough to be a-looking out for a man. Your sister was married last year, afore she turned 18, and I'd like to see you getting settled down pretty soon, too. I weren't but about 15 when me and your pa got hitched up."
Well, Ma, what have you been doing ever since? A slaving, a washing dishes, hoeing corn, and you ain't had hardly a year free when there weren't a new baby born, and you've never had no money to buy 'em any clothes, and you've had to sew and make 'em little flannel gowns out of your wore-out clothes. And take a look at Sis. She was married this time last year, and here in a month, a baby will be coming, and she'll be a slavin' for the rest of her life, a-trying to bring up those young'uns, without no money to do it on. No, Ma, I've seen enough of women getting married in these parts, and I ain't wantin' no man."
"Annie, life is life, and it ain't easy for nobody.
But a woman don't mind slaving, like you call it, if she's working for a man, and a woman don't know happiness until she holds her own young'uns in her own arms.
Well, I wouldn't mind working for a man if he did a little work for me, too. What working has Paul ever done for you while you've been working your whole life away for him?
Annie's ma walked closer. Gal, if I ever hear you say as much as one word against your pa, I'll slap your crooked face. 15 years old though you may be, your pa's been a powerful good man to me. He ain't never left me for another woman, and he ain't never beat me, except for that one time when he was drunk. And he's always taken you to Sunday school and to preaching, and he's let you off from working in the fields just so you could go down to that school and learn some reading and writing. So what if he drinks a little bit? I'll tell you right now, gal, the good Lord don't make a perfect man. And don't let me hear no more of your sassy talking about your pa. You hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, like I was saying, I reckon I'll fix up that old blue dress for you. And you can wear your sister's blue hat. She left it here when she got married.
Yes, ma'am.
Just then, the mother spotted someone walking up in the distance. Well, yonder comes Miss Allen from the hotel. Go fetch another chair, Annie. She might want to sit a spell. And Annie was excited. This was the beautiful summer lady that she had seen in the pink dress the previous day. She quickly set out an extra chair on the porch. Miss Allen was the visitor's name, and she was from a city far away and was staying at the hotel to enjoy the mineral springs water that flowed down from Windrock Mountain. Today, she was dressed in new sport clothes that were all the latest fashion in the city. Annie admired Miss Allen as she took a seat amongst the mountain folks. Ma was the first to speak. Well, law, Miss Allen, I like to not knowed you as I seen you coming eloping down the road. If I'd knowed you was a-comin', I would have combed my hair. How you getting along? Are you feeling stout as common? Why, yes, I am feeling quite well, thank you. This lovely mountain air agrees splendidly with both me and my husband. He played 18 holes of golf yesterday. Well, anyways, I just dropped by to say hello. I can't stay long. Well, can I at least offer you a dip? The mountain woman asked as she offered a pinch of snuff from a tin can that she pulled from her apron. Well, that's really kind of you, ma'am. But no thank you. Well, that's quite all right, Miss Allen. Annie don't do no dipping neither. She's got a notion that it ain't good for your teeth. That gal, she sure does get a lot of notions for a young'un. Annie certainly is a nice girl. Aren't you proud of her? Well, she ain't never given us no cause to be worrying. And her teacher says the gal is right smart with her learning. I tell you, she'd rather read than do anything else. I reckon she took after her pa. He can sign his name just as clear as writing in a book. Annie is right handy around the house, too. I ain't got no complaints to make against her. She was certainly kind to me yesterday. She went way up in the forest to get me a bunch of honeysuckle, and then she left it in my room and ran away before I had the opportunity to thank her.
Well, I'm sorry, Miss Allen. I had to go fetch the cows.
Well, then I'll thank you right here, Annie. And here is a little something to pay you for your trouble. Just then, Miss Allen held a $1 bill towards the mountain girl. However, Ma spoke up suddenly. Annie, don't you touch that there money. Now, we thank you, Miss Allen, but I ain't allowing a child of mine to take pay for God's own flowers that grow free in the forest. We ain't rich, but we ain't so poor that we gotta take money for being friendly. Well, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you or Annie, but it took such a long time and a lot of trouble for her to get the flowers that I just wanted to show her how much I appreciated her kindness to me. Also, if you don't mind, I brought her a little dress too. Would you let her accept that? Well, thank you much, Miss Allen, but I reckon not. The mountain girl's heart was about to burst at the thought of a new dress as she stood with anticipation. This is just a friendly act. After all, I took the flowers from Annie. Why wouldn't you let her accept a little dress from me? Well, it's like I said, blossoms grow free in the woods, and anybody can have them for the picking. But clothes cost money, and a lot of it. Oh, but this little dress cost almost nothing. It's not even new.
but one that my little sister wore, and she's outgrown it. I believe it will just about fit Annie, and I brought it along just in case you would let her have it. It's just a friendly act, that's all. Please, won't you let her have it?" The mountain woman paused for a moment, and then spoke. "Well, I reckon there ain't no harm in Annie a-taking it, since you put it that way. Now, Annie, you'll have to say your manners right smart to Miss Allen, for her being so good to you. And you'll have to tote her another bunch of them blossoms that she's so fond about the next time you go up to the hotel."
Well, thank you so much, Miss Allen.
Just then, the city woman handed the mountain woman a small paper package containing the dress, but the mountain woman held it in her lap as Annie looked expectantly at it. "Thank you so much for your hospitality, but I must be going now. I promised some friends that we would meet down at the main spring. It's such a beautiful spot. Do you mind pointing me in the right direction to the spring?" "Not that tall. You walk down there past old man Collis's barn, and then you turn. What? You know what? I tell you, Miss Allen, I'll just go to the crossroads with you. It ain't far, and it's a lot easier than trying to explain. Annie, you mind the baby, and make sure the Rex don't get away from here." With that, the pair disappeared into the distance.
Rex, did you hear what Miss Allen gave me?
Some old dress, I reckon.
Well, it's a dress, but I don't think it's an old one. That is, it might not be very old. She did say, however, that her little sister wore it once. Rex, do you reckon it's going to be pink?
Well, it don't make no difference to me.
Well, it makes all the difference in the world to me. I want one that's pink and flimsy. Oh, I hope it's pink. That I wish Ma would let me have that $1 I could have paid to have my fingernails all shine pink and white, and had my hair washed and curled, and I could have powdered my neck and my arms and fixed my cheeks and lips just the right color.
Gosh, that sure sounds like a heap of trouble for nothing.
It wouldn't be no trouble, but it'd be a heap of fun.
Just then, the girl paused in reflection, and she continued.
Rex, do you reckon that Ma ever wants pretty things for herself?
Ma? No. She ain't got no notions like you, and you better get them notions out of your head, too, or nobody will be wanting to marry a gal with such fine notions. I heard Paul say it, too.
I don't care. I ain't want to get married. I just want to live sort of free and read and learn a lot about how folks live who ain't been born up here in these mountains. And I want to have nice clothes like other folks, all sort of colors, blue like the sky and pink like the clouds at sunset.
Well, where would you wear them fine clothes if you had them?
To preaching, I reckon. That's the only place I ever get to go.
Just then, Annie slipped away, lost in thought, as she allowed her mind to dream and pretend that she was rich and lived far away in the city.
Excuse me, maid. Hand me them there shoes. No, not those old things. The black satin ones, with the real high heels and the gold buckles. Why, I'm going to a party. Which dress do you reckon I ought to wear? That white lace one? No, not the white one. It looks sort of pale at night. What about the red satin? No, it's just a bit much for this here party that I'm going to. How about the pink one? Oh, that's the very one. Oh, Rex, you reckon the dress the summer lady brought me is pink? Maid, tell the chauffeur that I'll be ready at 8 o'clock, and then come back and fix up my hair with this here comb.
Just then, the mother came back walking up the path after showing Miss Allen to the local watering hole. Annie, in her excitement for the dress, had left the clothes in the basket on the ground, and upon seeing this, her mother spoke up. Annie, what in the world are you a-doing with all the washing spread around on the ground? Pick up them clothes, gal. And Annie began picking up the clothes just as fast as she could.
Yes, Ma. Ma, do you have the dress that the summer lady gave me?
Well, yeah, I got it, and I hope your pa ain't gonna mind you keeping it.
Could you tell me, is it pink?
Law, Annie, I ain't had time to open it. I've been a-walking with Miss Allen, telling her about decoration coming up at the graveyard this Sunday.
Ma, please, Ma, can we open the box? Let me see if it's pink.
Law, Annie, you ain't got a mite bit of patience. Well, here it is. Go ahead, open it if you want to. I'm right interested myself. It saved me a powerful lot of trouble between now and Sunday
if you could wear it to the decoration, so I wouldn't have to fool with fixing up that old one of mine." Annie was the most excited she'd ever been in her 15 years of life, and she frantically fumbled with the strings of the package before finally removing the top of the box. And she reached in and pulled out the contents. There, before her eyes, was a brown linen school dress. The mountain girl was frozen, speechless, as her ma took the dress from her hands and shook it out. "Well now, ain't that a good, useful dress, without no trimmings at all? And it's a brown one, too. And that's your color, Annie. It'll look right swell with your sister's old blue hat. And it ain't got but one little hole in it. I can put a patch on it, since it's the exact same color as the dress you're wearing now. Don't you like it, honey?" The mountain girl softly spoke in the most spiritless voice possible.
"Yes, Ma."
"Well, your pa'll be coming home soon. I better get to fixing his victuals. Rex, bring up some firewood. And Annie, make sure you don't forget about them cows."
"Yes, Ma."
As the screen door shut behind Ma, Annie sat with the new dress crumpled in her lap and her head in her hands. Her brother could hear her sobbing a river of tears. "Annie? No, Annie, you don't care sure enough that dress ain't pink, do you? It don't make no real difference, do it? Oh, Annie, don't cry. I'll ask Pa to buy you a new dress. A pink one. Just don't cry."
"Oh, shut up, Rex. It don't make no real difference."
And just then, Ma hollered again from behind the screen door. "Annie, get after them cows, girl." "Oh, don't worry about fooling with those cows today, Annie. I'll go do it for you."
"Now, Rex, don't you remember, it ain't no man's job to be a-chasing cows."
Wow, there's something about Annie's story that just really hits home for me. I can remember several experiences as a child where I felt just like she did. How about you? Was there ever something that you really wanted, only to be let down? Let me know in the comments below. Up next is one of my all-time favorite stories to tell from North Carolina. Two lifelong friends who let a simple misunderstanding come between them, and they almost lost everything. There's a powerful message in this story that's sure to tug at your heartstrings. This tale starts with a lump of mud, and not just common, everyday mud, for the English hillside that it came from furnished the clay that made the potteries of Staffordshire famous a century and a half ago. Furthermore, this particular lump, by decree of a kindly destiny, was thrown upon the wheel of one Josiah Spode, and when he had fashioned it and stamped his letter S upon it, it was no longer a lump of mud, but a blue underglaze platter in the famous willow pattern that all the lovers of Old English pottery know and admire. How this Spode willow pattern came at long last to be the most cherished heirloom in the colonial farmhouse of John Hendricks in Maggie Valley, just over the North Carolina side of the Smoky Mountains, might well be a colorful yarn in itself, but I only merely mention it here as a bit of background, because our story really begins on the day when Miss John Hendricks discovered that the precious Spode was missing. Indeed, it was a strange piece of business, and Miss Hendricks was quite upset about it. Apparently, the platter had just walked out of its rack in the domestics' arts booth down at the county fair, and with its blue ribbon too, which the judges had attached to it when they awarded it first prize in the precious silver and china display. Now, deep down inside, Lucy Hendricks couldn't help but feeling that Miss Serena Simmerly, who had been in charge of the booth, ought to have been more watchful. She couldn't come out and say it, though. Of course, the two families living on adjoining farms, and Serena was such a good neighbor, too. Serena herself was in a state of consternation. "Oh, Lucy, I'm just sick about it," she lamented, after both women
had searched through the booth for the third time. And I tried to be so careful of everything. No use in worrying over it now, said Lucy. You had your hands full with such crowds around all the time and people handling the exhibits and asking all kinds of questions. But when I think about how hard I begged you to enter it, Lucy, I was just sure it would win a first prize. Well, I oughtn't have consented to the entry. You see, it's John's, and it came down from his great-grandma when she was back in England, and he'd rather lose the farm than that dish. He always said that he was going to give it to our son, James, and his bride on their wedding day. He's talked about it 100 times, I guess. Yes, dear, and that's what makes me feel all the more wretched about it. But I'm not going to give up. It's bound to turn up in a day or two. Somebody's just taken it out by mistake. No, Serena, I don't expect I'll ever see it again. We'll go ahead and let it go, and just forget about it. John, he's going to be furious when he finds out it's missing, though. Truth be told, it taxed Lucy's wifely diplomacy and the days that followed to steer the family conversation away from the delicate subject of the lost platter. But fortunately, there was much else to talk about, since Lucy had won her full quota of blue, red, and green ribbons on needlework, fancy eggs, and cold-packed vegetables in glass, and even John's own winnings on expertly graded bright-leaf tobacco had been written up on the first page of the county paper. One way or another, though, Lucy had managed to avoid any questioning about the spode. Well, I'll just let him think it's where it's always been kept, in the dining room cupboard, she told herself. And someday, when I'm in the city, I'll find a match for it at an antique shop, even if it takes a year's worth of my egg money. One thing that kept the incident fresh on her mind, though, was the unexpected announcement of the engagement of her son, James Hendricks and Flo Simmerly. Now, Lucy and Serena, each with motherly understanding, had watched the youngsters grow up from tiny lads, sliding down straw sacks and fishing for minnows in the creek. And now, noting that the old cow path across the intervening pasture field was smoother worn than it had ever been before, the mothers smiled. After all, it was the most natural thing in the world. If only Lucy could have put the thought of that platter out of her mind, as she really tried to do. But no matter how she tried, the mystery of the thing would keep coming back to her. It was certainly careless of Serena, she thought, and Lucy couldn't feel otherwise about it. And Serena had been so persistent about having it. She made 3 trips across the pasture before Lucy would even agree to let it go. Strange, too, how fond Serena had always been about that spode. Lucy thought to herself as she did her morning work. She's told me so often about the fire that burned in her father's house when she was just a gal and destroyed all the china and the things that would have been hers. But then Lucy would feel ashamed of herself for brooding over the matter. She ought never think of it again. But she would. There's something fishy, the way she had always had to have a look at it whenever she dropped in. And that time she borrowed it when a lot of company came, and she kept it for pert near 6 months until I had to ask her for it. Not for the world, though, would Lucy have ever pointed a finger of accusation. It was only her ever-present dread of John's disappointment and disapproval when he should find out, as he would sooner or later. So Lucy grew jittery every time she thought of it. She thought she knew her son James, too. But who does know a boy in love? Say, Ma, James inquired casually, rummaging through the cupboard for a piece of pie to sustain life between quitting time and supper time. Where's Dad's big blue dish that you used to keep on this shelf? Lucy's face went pale. John was reading a paper just outside on the front porch. Shh, don't shout so, son. Well, let me see. I just don't remember right now. Why do you ask? Oh, it was no reason at all. I just hadn't noticed it lately. Not since the fair, I guess. Just then, the gray ghost or something must have waved a shadowy hand before Lucy's troubled eyes. Unknown to herself, all the pent-up wonderings, all her pent-up frustration, and the petulant musings of the past few weeks lent a bitterness to her tone. Well, nobody knows where it is, unless it's your future mother-in-law. But for heaven's sake, don't breathe a word to her, or to your father. But the insinuation in her words was lost upon the literal-minded, unsuspicious James. That very evening, as he sat with Flo in the moonlight on the Simmerly front porch, he suddenly thought of something. By the way, sweetheart, I understand my mom to say that your mother has that old spode platter of hers. If she's through with it, I'll just take it with me when I go. It was midsummer, but for the rest of that evening, there seemed to be a cloud over the moon and a particular chill in the evening air. And the next day's mail brought a crisp note from Flo with the engagement ring enclosed. And so it was. The path across the pasture began from that day to fade out, overgrown with grass and weeds, which was the most natural thing in the world. But for both James and Flo, it was the most terrible thing that ever happened. James took it with a tight set of lips and a stiffened jaw, and remembering what his mother had said about keeping the thing from his father, he said nothing. All John observed was that the boy didn't shave and get all dressed up every evening after work, and that all of a sudden he was a heck of a farm laborer throughout the entire tobacco cutting season. He drove 4 good horses to gauntness, half a dozen tenants to distraction, and his own stalwart frame to a skeleton. Lucy became horrified when James naively confessed to blurting out her unguarded insinuation to Flo. But now that the fat was in the fire, she sought to outspokenly justify herself. Of course, son, I never dreamed of you mentioning it, and I'm awful sorry for the mess that it stirred up. But after all, I can't help but believe that she took that platter. Why, if her conscience had been clear, she wouldn't have flared up like she did. But Ma, it was such a trifle thing to break up a family friendship over. To say nothing of Flo and me. What did we have to do with that darned old dish anyhow? James argued glumly. Well, I'm sorry, son, answered Lucy repentantly. But I was all torn up, and I still am, dreading the time when your father finds out about it. It was the first time I've ever went squarely against his wishes. Oh well, we'll drop it. But I wish that darned old plate had stayed back in England. Over at the Simmerly house, Flo had started off bravely enough, singing snatches of sprightly college songs as she rattled the dishes at the sink. Loyal to her mother, she boiled with rage at the deliberate insult to her mom. Why, if he thinks his mother can call you a common sneak thief and get away with it, she stormed. He's just a yellow hound, and I don't ever want to see him again. But before many days, though, Serena noted that whenever the Hendricks farm wagon clattered down the turnpike, Flo's eyes would be furtively peering through the half-closed shades at the slumping figure in the driver's seat, and then the girl would take to her bed for the rest of the day. Poor child, it's killing her, Serena would tell herself reproachfully, and the pain of it would make the sting of the unjust accusation against herself seem slight in comparison. Why did I take this so seriously? She groaned. If I'd just laughed it off as a joke. But now everything's ruined, past all mending. Week after week, Serena saw her own flesh and blood, pining and paling to a shadow. Flo wouldn't even let her mention the subject or anything connected with it. But the mother's sleep was broken nightly by 2 haunting pictures, Flo's face at a darkened window, and a great oval dish with an oriental willow pattern showering tears into a river spanned by an arching bridge, and 2 mourning doves perched above the treetops. Lucy Hendricks made her semi-annual shopping pilgrimage down to the big city. Her rounds to the department stores and the 5 and dimes were complete when she decided to drop into an antique shop I'd like to see some English chinaware, especially some platters in the willow pattern, if you got anything in stock." "Well, I believe I have," the salesman replied, obligingly. "Step this way, please." There were several willow platters, mostly good reproductions, but 2 were flawless originals, bearing the unmistakable S of Josiah Spode. "Well, I need something to replace one that's been in my family for generations. And, well, it got lost. And this one here is almost a perfect match. The size, the coloring, and everything. Only mine had a tiny nick right here on the rim, just above those 2 doves." "Well, madam, if you want a perfect matching, our retouching department can easily mark it exactly like the original." Well, that night, Lucy Hendricks, for all that she had to forego the purchase of a living room rug that she had wanted for a long time, yet she slept more soundly than she had done in months. But John would never know why. To be sure, only one of the 2 heavy burdens on her heart had been lifted. She realized with sadness her heart still ached every time she saw her son James, unshaven and haggard, going about his task like the most spiritless hired hand, and Serena Simmerly seeing for the 100th time the pitiful figure of Flo, weeping her heart out on her bed. She felt like a murderess. "It's all my fault," she moaned. "After all, it was my carelessness that caused the whole wretched business. How can I blame Lucy for feeling like she does? It's going to drive me stark mad. I must do something. I'm willing to face any rebuff, any humiliation, if I can only patch up our broken friendship and put things the way they were for Flo and James." The longer she wrote it, the more fantastic and unreal the thing became, and the less her own wound rankled. She came to feel a sense of self-condemnation. She started to see herself through Lucy's eyes, unfair and dishonest. Why shouldn't she think of me as so? The plate was hers, and I teased her into lending it to me, and I lost it. I might as well have stolen it. In a sense, I did steal it, and I'm going to give it back. A few days later, Serena walked into the antique shop down in the city, and she asked to see some willow-patterned plates. The clerk brought out the collection, including the one original Spode. "Well, that's just what I'm looking for," Serena said. "I want to get it to replace the one I let get away." "We frequently have calls like that, for such pieces as this especially. Were there any flaws or marks on the original that you'd like to have reproduced?" "Well, I hardly remember. It seems, though, that there was a very small nicked place, somewhere on the rim, but I couldn't just describe it. Probably a little surface chipping, say right about here," the clerk suggested smilingly. "That can be handled without a bit of trouble. We do it every week." The next afternoon, Serena slipped out the back gate and picked her way along the grass-grown path, and Lucy Hendricks received her with embarrassed politeness. Serena was the first to speak. "I've come on a strange errand, and it's taken me months to make me see it's the only thing to do. I've brought home your Spode platter." "Why, Serena," Lucy exclaimed, "you mean that somebody found it and returned it to you?" "No, I'm afraid not. No one else had anything to do with it." "But I don't understand. But, Serena, I need to tell you now that I could have bitten my tongue out 1,000,000 times for hinting to James that I thought you had been careless about looking after it." "I wasn't careless, Lucy," Serena lied. Though in her overwrought state, she made herself believe that she was telling a hideous, damning truth. "Lucy, I've always envied that platter. I wanted it, and I took it, and it's nearly driven me insane. It's wrecked our children's lives. Now, I'm begging you to take it back, and to please forgive me." With that, Serena buried her face in her apron, sobbing hysterically. Lucy, too, was crying unabashed. "Oh, my dear, I'll never believe for an instant that you deliberately took it. I can understand. But if it'll make you feel better, and it'll help us fix things up again for the children, I'll take it." The 2 women dried their eyes and clasped each other's hands in a pledge of old friendship renewed in the burning baptism of tears. Then they worked out a plan to explain matters to James and Flo, involving neither accusation or confession, instead smoothing out all the differences and wiping out all ill feeling. "What in the world am I going to do with 2 spodes?" Lucy asked herself in bewilderment. "I don't suppose the antique dealer would take one back, but John better never see this. But the funny thing is, he's never even suspected the old one wasn't in his place all this time. But I wouldn't want to go through that nightmare of this thing again for all the china in the world." Thereafter, one spode, the one Serena had bought, was placed in the familiar corner of the cupboard. The other was carefully hidden in the linen closet, under the best tablecloths. The secret would be safe here, since no man ever set foot in that sanctuary. Meanwhile, Lucy and Serena's strategy worked, albeit not without a great deal of diplomacy on Flo's part. But the blessed sight of the 2 mothers visiting each other again, chatting and bantering in the old friendly way, healed the scars of estrangement, and the sun shone brighter day by day, and the moon beamed more softly through the apple trees at night. The wedding took place just after Christmas and was followed by a dinner down at John and Lucy's house. Aunt Roxy, the live-in maid who had reigned as the queen of the Hendricks kitchen for more than 30 years, laid down the law to her mistress. "Now, Miss Lucy, you ain't going to set your foot in the kitchen today. You all got plenty to do without worrying over the dinner fixings." "Well, all right, Roxy," laughed Lucy. "I know the dinner's in good hands, and I'll obey your orders." The bridal party sat down to Roxy's culinary masterpiece, and the hostess took an appraising and approving look at the perfectly appointed table. In her full pride, Roxy entered, bearing aloft a steaming hot turkey, and was followed by her daughter as a second waitress, carrying the great golden Virginia baked ham. Lucy glanced casually at the 2 platters, one at the head and the other at the foot of the table. Just then, her heart stopped. Roxy had found the other spode in the linen closet. Lucy's crimson blush of mortification went unnoticed, though, for at that moment, John Hendricks rose in his place to greet the guest in true Southern wedding feast style. "Friends, before we proceed to partake of this modest meal, I wish to greet you, one and all, and bid you welcome to this happy occasion. And in honor of the occasion, I desire to bestow upon my new daughter-in-law and her fortunate husband a token of my fatherly regard and affection, something that I've kept and prized through the years, just for this day and this very hour." Lucy's heart was pounding out of her chest as John unwrapped a package that he had hidden secretly beside his chair. "Friends, this is my great-grandmother's old English dinner platter." And as the applause died away, John glanced down at the turkey, which was waiting for his carving hand, and for the first time, he saw the dish it was laying on. He laughed. "Why, Lucy, honey, I thought you knew what I had planned, to have Roxy take the turkey back and exchange platters. And here you've gone and borrowed one. Oh, no worries. It's all my fault. I might as well confess. When this plate went to the fair last fall, I got an uneasy feeling about it, and I slipped out a while Miss Simmerly was busy at the other end of the booth. I grabbed it for fear that it might be lent out again at some church get-together or something. So I tucked it away in the bottom of that old trunk of mine in the attic." Just then, Flo and James stared at each other in wonderment, and Lucy and Serena exchanged one glance. In that glance, the whole drama moved swiftly to sudden understanding. What a stark tragedy, with cruel, false accusation, the pain and the pity of the past months. It might have been, but this was no time nor the place for tragedy or heartbreak. So the 2 women, with the wisdom that only mothers have, did just the right thing. They laughed, and then the bride and the groom laughed too. That's what wedding dinners are for." The guests laughed, though a bit mystified as to what the joke was. John Hendricks laughed, beaming upon them all, as a proud father should do. Even Aunt Roxy laughed, shaking her fat sides until her apron string burst. At long last, all was well in Maggie Valley again.
Was the husband right to keep his secret from his wife? After all, it nearly cost the friendship of two old friends. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Our next story comes to us from Tennessee, where a boy named Sam is faced with a daunting decision that will require him to take a leap of faith. And lucky for Sam, there was a good woman there to help him along the way. This is a powerful story I like to call The Preacher's Wife.
After supper was over, 20-year-old Samuel Mullins changed from his rough clothing for the only clean set that he owned. Then he set out walking down that dirt path that followed the creek through Shepherd's Gap towards the Harmony Chapel Baptist Church. It had been a long, blistering hot day working in the hayfield. Sam's back ached, his arms were sore, but this was no time to rest, since it was Wednesday night, especially considering that on the white wooden steps of that old church a mile away, Doris Jenkins was surely already there, waiting for him. And in Sam's mind, there was nary a finer way a fella could possibly spend the evening than with a gal like Doris. Before long, Sam crossed the creek bed for the final time, and he walked through Old Man Hoskins' pasture, across from the Baptist church. He saw Doris from afar, with her pink calico gown, making a bright spot against the whiteness of the steps. It was just after sunset when he finally made it to the church, but the sky, it was beautifully painted, with rosy clouds still in the west. Truth be told, Doris wasn't the prettiest girl in Shepherd's Gap, but she had a smile that meant the world to Sam, and it was worth the long walk just to see it again. Everyone in Knox County knew that young Sam and Doris were actually lovebirds. Yet the pair was extremely shy and awkward in the expression of their deep, mutual feelings between them. Their very loneliness, while they were just a boy and girl down at Island View School, had drawn them to each other. Sam was an orphan, and Doris's pa had long since married a woman who resented Doris's very existence. You see, life wasn't a fairy tale in Shepherd's Gap. Matter of fact, you might say that both Sam and Doris had a grudged life, up to the time each was able to work. Then came the days of toil, with little to enliven them or to inspire aspiration. Yet, stranger things have happened than that both should be absurdly ambitious. You see, in Sam's family, his grandpa had been a devout Christian man, well educated for his time, and not without power in his oratory skills. And for 41 years of his life, his brimstone and fire sermons came from the pulpit of Harmony Baptist Church, so hot with his passion for the Lord that the soles of the faithful's feet would stick to the floor, and the pews themselves would begin to heat up. Each Sunday, a bounty of souls would be saved because of the old man's preaching. Everyone in Shepherd's Gap was sure that the old man's son, who was Sam's father, would fill in the old man's role as pastor when he went on to glory. But it was never to be, because Sam's father, he possessed none of the old man's godly ambitions or aspirations, and the doors of the Harmony Baptist Church had been closed ever since, and its sanctuary, that had been filled with praise and worship, was now silent. And tonight, just like most every other night, His grandson, Sam, sat on those church steps alongside his sweetheart, the very same steps where Sam's grandfather had lifted up his voice so many times in the days of the past. They seemed little nearer to the fulfillment of their hopes than before. Physically weary, Sam's spirits wavered. It was all he wanted, you see. Sam dreamed of reopening the doors to that church. For Doris, the 18-year-old girl had long dreamed of a home different than what her own life had been. She dreamed of peaceful days, of thrifty management, of love, of being kind to those around her. She entered enthusiastically into Sam's ideas. She had always supported him and encouraged him from his boyhood to his daring dreams of success. If only I had somebody to teach me. If I had money, I could go to the seminary down in Knoxville and learn how to be a preacher. But I'll never have enough money to pay for it. Heck, I don't even have a church that can sponsor me, and I can't figure out how to do it alone.
Well, what in heavens do you mean? How are you going to do it on your own? You're never going without me. No one has stood by your side or believed in you like I have, and we're not going to give up Samuel Mullins III. I've got a little money hidden away, you know.
Well, I guess we can't do anything until the haying's over. But as soon as it's done, I'm going to go up and see. And so it was. For the next few weeks, the days were full of back-breaking work in those hayfields. And then there were those endless nights of dreaming and planning on those church steps before finally the work was done and the stalwart country lad gathered his courage to travel down to the big city of Knoxville, dressed in his best tattered clothing. Upon his arrival, he promptly interrupted a meeting of the faculty at a certain college and theological seminary. He came in asking shyly for entrance into the college, with little money and no church influence to back him. And as Sam stood there before those men, dressed in their suits and their fancy clothes, he froze up for a moment. And the professors, well, they just looked down their noses and took little notice of the rural boy. They just stared at him. Finally, Sam found the courage to speak. The spirit of his grandpa seemed to flow through him. He told of his dreams that he had had for years, his toil, and also of Doris, her interest and encouragement. Somehow, the mountain boy's sincere words and faith just poured out of him. And exactly how that happened, Sam had no clue. And when he was finished, the faculty said little. But as the old president walked from the great hall to the library afterwards, he couldn't get Sam's words out of his mind. The young man had seemed so sincere. So what that he didn't have money? Wasn't it his godly command to help those in need? Finally, the president said to the professor of Greek, who was walking alongside of him, "It's been a long time since I felt that a lad had such a clear call. In fact, I had been wondering if there was to be no more inspiration in the youth of today." And after consideration, the school promised Sam shelter in a part of a house on the campus. Oh, he went back to Doris, triumphant. Now was Sam's chance to become the very sword of the Lord. His return to Shepherd's Gap was filled with whispers of the young boy becoming a man, going to college, and of his projected wedding to Doris. And such prospects for a boy of no property caused the wildest excitement. Doris, too, was poor, but as the mountain women have always done, they did all they could to help the teenage girl prepare to become a godly woman and a preacher's wife. Her setting out was discussed far and near, and there were many presents from women all throughout the cove who thought that by helping her out, they were given directly to the Lord. Meetings were held to help her learn how to sew And from one of these gatherings grew the idea that afterwards caused such a sensation at the college. Meanwhile, some of the menfolk had chuckled at the very thought of the farmer's boy going off to college to get a sheepskin to become a preacher. After all, just where was he going to preach? Harmony Baptist Church had been closed for years, and it was a dead building. The small country church with its pulpit reached by a winding stair, its benches black with age, hadn't been open for many years. Even though, before long, a sentiment began to grow amongst the womenfolk to open it one Sunday during the summer. And Sam, well, he was asked to conduct a service by a committee of elders in the community. Sam wasn't so sure, though. Well, I can't just preach it. I'm just now starting college, and I don't have any experience. All I've ever done is plow from sunrise to dark. Heck, I don't even know what I expect to learn in college yet. So Sam kindly declined. Man, it'll be 7 years before I'm fit to teach the word of the Lord. But just then, the owner of the general store, Ted Watkins, a lifelong friend of Sam's grandfather, spoke up. The Lord will tell you what to say. Just have faith in the Lord, son. So Sam promised to think on it, and he obliged to give him an answer the next day. But first, he had to go see Doris. And I tell you, there was no happier woman than her in those days. She was sitting at her sewing table when Sam came in, humming a quaint country ditty. He thought her to be a changed woman. Surely, she had never seemed so pretty in the olden days of toil and anxiety. And she listened intently as Sam told her what the people had asked. Its full meaning dawned upon her.
You can do this, Sam. I know you can. I believe in you, and I know how proud your grandpa would be too. Think of it. This will help you and everyone who lives here. The very thought of fellowship in that old church, after all these years, I'm absolutely sure that it will be beautiful.
But what will I preach? I've never written a sermon.
Sam, there won't be nothing expected of you, nothing that you're not ready for. No one expects you to talk of great things from around the world. And Lord knows, there's plenty to talk about right here. Don't preach all high and mighty like. Everyone here in this cove is just common men. Talk man to man. And Sam, don't forget to talk a little to us women too. We need God.
So with that, Sam and Doris walked down to the gate together. There was an old sugar maple tree there, and he leaned down and kissed her solemnly. Doris, I'll do it, but you must wear your bride dress, and I want you to sit all alone on the front bench.
I've been on this gospel way for many, many days, but I know it won't be long till I am gone. And if the Lord would come tonight, I'd be on a one-way flight, just a twinkling of an eye away from home.
Wagging tongues spread the news all over Shepherd's Gap, as far away as Dry Cove and Thundering Creek, that for the first time in over 20 years, there was gonna be a preaching down at Harmony Baptist Church. It was a Sunday in late August, and the little church was filled, with overflow standing in the doors and looking through the windows. The womenfolk had spent the week leading up to the service with an old hymn book, practicing on some of their old gospel favorites. They sat on the second bench in their clean summer array, so their voices could be heard throughout the sanctuary. But there alone on the first bench sat Doris, dressed in her simple white dress, the one that the womenfolk had made for her, the one she was to be married in, wearing a simple hat. And when the house was full, Sam walked in and took his place, standing there in his black suit. He looked like a true son of toil, a lad from the very midst of the people. And just then, the women started singing, nearer, my God, to thee.
Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee. Even though it be a cross that raiseth me, still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee.
And all who could sing slowly joined in. And then Sam read, not too well, but a portion of the book of Matthew, summoning all the courage and faith he had within him. It was a simple message of God's love and forgiveness. Afterwards, he stepped down from the pulpit and stood amongst the flock. Oh, and what a sermon it was! There was nary a dry eye in the room. And just then, an old spirit that had been missing for so long filled the building. Glory be to God. The Holy Ghost was once again filling the sanctuary of Harmony Baptist Church. Now Sam, he's a great preacher now, and his and Doris's dreams were nothing in comparison to God's reality. They still talk about him down in Knoxville, at the college of his hard study, Doris's aid and comradeship, and of the wagon load of provisions that came to him every few months down from Shepherd's Gap. They still tell of Sam's gift of speech, his honors, and what a credit he is to the college. And somewhere out there, Sam's grandpa, I know he's just looking down and smiling, standing beside his blessed Savior in glory. Well done, Sam. Well done.
Well done indeed, Sam. What a beautiful story. Up next, sometimes right and wrong isn't as clear-cut as it seems. And what's right in the eyes of the law might not be the right thing to do when it comes to the heart. I like to call this story The Decision, and I hope you enjoy it.
Dry leaves rustled under Amos's feet as he approached the cave. He paused for a moment and winced as his empty stomach growled, making even more noise. Still, Amos gazed at the opening just ahead. The lawman was a bungling woodsman at best, yet here he was, stalking the greatest game of all, a wanted man. Blood drummed in his ears, and his heart seemed to skip a beat with every step. He stood tense, yet trembling, because if the man he was looking for was in fact in that cave, he was probably now well aware of the lawman's approach. Amos began to move forward, inches at a time. He was a town-bred man, clearly out of his element in the rugged wilds of these mountains. Yet the deputy sheriff had been on the trail for 2 solid days. And in his haste, he hadn't even put on his uniform. Instead, he was dressed in plain clothes that were now dirty and torn from his journey through the thick briars and rocky terrain. Worst of all, he was lightheaded from the lack of food, but he did the best he could to push the hunger pains aside as he recklessly plunged into the cave. Inside, the sudden darkness blinded him for a moment. Then he noticed a makeshift bed made out of sweet fern in one corner, next to the ashes of a campfire and a Dutch oven stove. Just then, something else caught his eyes. Just a few feet away, on a shelf, there were 3 shiny cans of beans. Oh, the sight of those beans brought Amos's hunger roaring back. He quickly grabbed a can and groaned when he found that the first one was filled with gunpowder. The next was filled with shot, and the third Well, it only had odds and ends of string and nails. Suddenly, there was a noise from behind. In the doorway stood a figure that raised the hair on Amos's head, sending a chilly sensation throughout his body. There stood a tall man. His mane of black hair was blowing unchecked about his shoulders. He stood turned away from Amos, having halted in the doorway as if to take one last look around before entering the cave. He was also examining one of his own hands, and in that moment, a small shivering moan escaped him. A rifle rested in the hollow of his arm, and Amos could see the outline of a large Colt pistol hanging on the one side of his belt, and a long knife strapped to the other. Amos gulped, and then it went swiftly through his mind that those who sent him on this errand should have warned him about the size of his quarry. Suddenly, Amos panicked and spoke. "Excuse me, sir. I must beg your pardon. I was pert near dead beat and powerful famished, and so I just crawled in here looking for a bite of food." The tall figure in the doorway slowly turned, and a strange chill fell upon Amos as he recognized the wanted man's face. The outlaw's big, dark eyes looked the intruder up and down, and in a full, gravelly voice that was unexpectedly gentle, the owner of the cave spoke. "Howdy, stranger. I didn't see you come up on account of me cutting my hand with this here gun." He came towards Amos with his bleeding hand outstretched. Now was the deputy sheriff's moment. All he had to do was handcuff the outlaw. Yet he didn't. Instead, he examined the hand, which was torn and lacerated on the gun hammer, and with exclamations of sympathy, Amos proceeded to bind it up with strips torn from his own handkerchief. "Snagged," Amos said as he noted how the great muscle of the thumb was torn across. "I don't see how you ever did that on a gun hammer. I've nursed a good bit of wounds, but I tell you right now, this here hand, oh, it's bad, 'cause it's torn clean in two. And I tell you, the look of this here, it reminds me of a tear that only a bullet could make." He rambled on nervously as he attended the big man's wound. "You let me clean it now. It'll hurt some, but it'll save you some trouble after a while. You get set down on the bed. Where can I fetch some water?" "Well, there's a spring around the turn in the cave over there." With that, Amos took one of the tin cans and emptied its contents, talking all the while as though he was trying to prevent the outlaw from speaking. "Yeah, I got lost today," he volunteered, as he cleansed the wound skillfully and drew its ragged lips together. "Golly, you sure tore that thumb up good. You won't hardly be able to do nothing with that hand for a spell." "Yes, sir, I got lost in the woods today. That's what I did. To me, one tree just looks pretty much just like the other, and each old rock is just the same as the next one. I reckon I've walked 20 miles since sunup." The outlaw gave a long, curious look at Amos, as if he were sizing up his story. "Well, you're mighty handy about this sort of thing. I reckon I'll have a tough time here alone till my hand heals." "Oh, don't you worry about that a bit. I'll stay with you a while. I ain't the type to leave a man in such a fix. Besides, I ain't got nothing in particular to do, and nowhere in particular to go anyhow." His host's eyes dwelt on him. "Well now, that'd be mighty kind of you, stranger." All the while, in Amos's pocket, a pair of steel handcuffs clinked against each other. At any moment, while he was dressing the outlaw's hand, he could have snapped them upon the outlaw's great wrist and made him his prisoner. Yet, an hour later, when the big man had told him of a string of fish that was tied down in the branch, and of a small cellar down by the spring containing fresh honeycomb and cold cornbread, the two men sat together at supper like brothers. They talked over the fire with the freedom and abandon of complete strangers that the circumstances allowed. Amos told him his name, his birthplace, his habits and temperament of his parents, his present hopes, and even sketched an outline of his sweet Katie. Oh, Katie, who was waiting for him for when he had enough money to buy that little farm down in Henderson County, North Carolina. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the host had not even offered up his name, and that night as they divided the bed into 2 separate bundles of fern and pine needles and placed each bed on opposite corners of the cave, the men settled down for the night. And later on, after good nights had been exchanged and Amos was sure that his host was asleep, he stirred and slowly turned over to make sure. But in that moment, the deep voice across the room broke the silence. "Well, I guess you might as well call me Otis." Amos was exhausted from the past 2 days, so he fell asleep and the night passed quickly. He rose at sunrise and was a little surprised to find that his host was still sleeping. And as the lawman lifted his coat that had been folded in a bundle beneath his head, those handcuffs in his pocket clinked once again. He looked across the cave quickly, but Otis was sound asleep, laying on his bed of leaves, with one great arm underneath his head and his injured hand resting across his broad chest. This was the first of many strange days, golden October days, cool and full of the ripened beauty of fall. Otis taught Amos how to snare woodcock and pheasants, since Amos missed every time he tried to shoot one. "Now ain't that the devil?" Amos exclaimed after he had let his third bird get away unharmed. If I was shooting at a man, I'd be steady as a clock. I'd be cool as an ice wagon. But when that little old brown bird just scoots and scutters up out of the grass, well, it sure rattles me." His teacher apparently took no note of the significance of this statement. Yet Amos's very ears were red as it slipped out, and he felt uneasy because those handcuffs, well, they were no longer in his pocket, but now they laid carefully hidden under his fern bed. Nevertheless, the days passed, and each day Amos dressed his host's hand and began to appreciate the man that he was supposed to arrest. Well, if he'd been an ugly, common-looking brute, I'd have nabbed him in a minute, Amos told himself weakly. And every day, those handcuffs under the dried fern leaves laid heavier upon his soul. Amos had set the 20th day of October as the day that he would leave. But the night before, Amos was conflicted. "You see, it's like this. Katie, well, she's the best girl and the prettiest one I've ever seen. But she's got a paw that'll hit her every time the drink's in him. And he works her like a dog, hires her out, takes every cent she earns. And her ma, God rest her soul, well, she's been dead for 2 years. And now the old man is marrying in and taking in home a woman that ain't fit for my Katie to be with. And when I heard of it, I told her, 'Katie, I'll take you out of that hole.' And then I told her about that reward money that was offered. I just knew it would be easy. And Katie and I, we'd be married inside of a month. And that's what brought me up here, into the mountains and to this cave. And now, I've been thinking about Katie a heap in these last few days. And here it is. I'm going home with empty hands. And I'm going to have to say to her, 'Katie, would you please just take me as I am, without a job, because I know for a fact that I won't have a job if I go back empty-handed. But I'll say, Katie, can you please just take me as I am and wait just a little spell for a farm?' And I guess she'll do it. I guess she'll take me. You see, I've got that kind of love for her that makes me think that she'll take me. Otis, have you ever loved a woman like that? I mean, did you ever love one so much that it felt like you could trust her just the same as you trust yourself?" The mountaineer stretched out his injured hand and examined it for so long without speaking that it seemed as though he wouldn't answer at all. The wound was healing admirably now, and just then he finally raised his head and looked across the fire. His black eyes were wells of misery, so much so that Amos had to catch his breath. Upon the silence fell Otis's big, serious voice, as solemn and sonorous as a church bell. "Now, you asked if I ever loved and trust a woman like that. Yeah, I did. And well, it didn't work out for me. And you say you're going home to be with her? with just your bare hands? What for? You found your man. Here I am. You know who I am, and I know who you are. That reward money is all yours for the taking." The big man went on, leaning forward. "I knowed you was a lawman the first time I clapped my eyes on you. You didn't know whether I could shoot with my left hand as well as my right, and I didn't choose to let you know. And I watched you, and I was waiting on you to try to put those handcuffs on me. Any minute after you found out my hand was a mess, and there were plenty of times when I was asleep, or you thought I was. Why didn't you do it? Why didn't you try? I know you've got that pair of handcuffs under your bed." Amos's face reddened with shame and grief as he dragged the handcuffs from their hiding place. Otis took them from Amos's hands and thereafter swung them thoughtfully in his strong, calloused fingers as he talked. "You mean to tell me you're going away without making use of these? Well, the truth is, I'm sick of living this way. After you leave, I'll be all alone in this cave again, and I'm as apt to put that muzzle of my gun in my mouth. That's how I feel most of the time. I'll tell you what you do, Amos. You just take these and put them on me, and take me down to Henderson County and collect that reward money. That'll square things up for you and the poor little gal. What do you say?" Amos's face twisted as though he had bitten into a crab apple. I don't think I can. I don't know why, but I just can't make myself do it. And well, why don't you sleep on it tonight? You'll make the right decision in the morning. The last night in the cave was one of gusty, moving breezes and brilliant moonlight. Yet Amos tossed and turned all night, until finally the gray of dawn found him wide awake, making ready for his journey home. And as he started to leave, Otis spoke up. "Amos, I'm going to tell you something. You're probably wondering why I've done the things I've done, and likely you've heard tales, and most likely they were all lies. You see, it was this way. I lived over in Mills River on a farm. I never had no schooling growing up, but my pa, he passed the farm down to me when he died, and I just kept right on farming. And it was just me and Sarah. We had been sweethearts ever since we were both young'uns, and we were just at the beginning of our lives, only a few weeks from being married. And anyhow, the coal company had been trying to buy my land for years, but I wouldn't sell. They were dirty folks, and they had all the politicians in their back pockets. Sarah and I went down to the courthouse to sign the paperwork and get hitched. But when we got there, there were several big shots from the coal company in the courthouse that day. And when we went to sign that marriage paperwork, the court clerk asked me for my signature and told me that Sarah, she had to sign a different paper. So I signed my ex, and that court clerk, he just smiled. He rolled up the paper and put it in his coat and started laughing. "You fool, you just signed your property over to the coal company. I was tricked, Amos. They stole my land, and I don't know what come over me. I just pulled my pistol, and before I knew what happened, I shot him dead." And that was the story of the crime. Amos stood at the mouth of the cave in the early morning light that was casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. His heart was heavy. The weight of his decision was pressing on him as he turned back to face Otis one last time. The outlaw sat quietly, his dark eyes steady, as if he had already known the choice that Amos would make. I can't do it," Amos finally whispered. I can't bring you in." And Amos swallowed hard, thinking of Katie and the life they were supposed to build. He would return to her with nothing but his word, and somehow he hoped that it would be enough. Without looking back, Amos walked down the mountain, the sound of his boots fading into the autumn wind, knowing that some debts were too heavy to collect.
Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with me and listening to some of my favorite stories. I'd like to leave you with one final story that takes place in the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. A true story that will warm your heart. I like to call this Miss Penelope.
The first thing Penelope Wilson had to do when she became the teacher of the little mountain school in Dry Cove was get used to being called Miss Penelope. The next and much harder job she was tasked with was learning the names, the faces, and the legions of young Tadlocks who attended the tiny schoolhouse. Penelope soon discovered, however, that most of the rising generation whose names she registered were the descendants of Grandpa Hap Tadlock, whose 2-story log house was the geographical, political, and religious hub of Dry Cove. Grandpa Tadlock and his aged wife were living their sunset years in unbroken calm. The hard toll of their youth and prime had bought them as much comfort as could be had in this mountain cove. All of their sons and daughters, with their families, they all lived with them in the valley and did the old man's bidding. Only one son, named Davy, the youngest and the most restless, had moved to North Carolina and settled on the Cataloochee Creek in the shadow of the Great Smoky Mountains. The rest had remained to replenish the earth in the ancestral cove. Consequently, Penelope had just enrolled 5 lusty young Tadlocks, whom she learned to distinguish as Big Hamp, Little Hamp, Bill's Hamp, Luther's Hamp, and Wormy Hamp. After that, all went well. However, there was one little Tadlock whom Penelope discovered one day, though his name wasn't on her school roll, nor would it ever be. She was assured that he could ever be on any school roll. For D. Boone Tadlock, 8 years old, the youngest and the wide-eyed grandson of Grandpa Tadlock, knew the big world only as it peeped at him from the outside as he laid upon his pallet on the cabin floor, or perhaps from the sunny front porch on a pretty day. Old Doc Wheeler had long ago pronounced his verdict with a grave shaking of his head. His hip joints ain't made like they ought to be, and there ain't nary a thing we can do about it. But he'll never be able to walk. Now, D. Boone, he knew that his poor, twisted legs could never carry him through the gate and up the wooded ridge of Cattail Knob that walled in his narrow world. His deep brown eyes, though, they missed little of what came or went through the windows and the doors or the cracks in the chinking of the log walls. Penelope had loomed upon the lad's horizon soon after her arrival. Heck, she was the first foreigner he had ever known, and she came from a great city of fully 5,000 people that was inconceivably far away, 100 miles away, they say, and she was the graduate of a state college. But for all that she was cityfied and educated, folks soon found that she was just as common as a rail fence, and that was as fine as a compliment that anyone could ever pay you in Dry Cove. A day or so after Penelope's first visit to the crippled child, she made it convenient to pass Jake Tadlock's house, just when she knew that she would find Jake and Sarah, his wife, out on the milking lot. While Sarah milked, Penelope sat on a barrel, and she talked about little D. Boone.
"Oh, he's a wonderful child,"
she declared.
"I've never seen a finer head or more intelligent eyes. You should certainly have him examined by a specialist. They're making remarkable cures of such cases nowadays. I want you to let me write a splendid doctor I know in Nashville and ask for his advice."
A sudden gleam of hope landed in Sarah's eyes as she looked up from her milking cow. "Oh, Miss Penelope, do you reckon they could make him so he could walk? The good Lord knows how proud I'd be." Yet there was the faintest glimmer of animation in Jake's voice as he replied, "Much obliged, ma'am. It's kind of you to offer that. However, I'd do nothing without asking my pa, and I'll name it to him the first time he drops in." It just so happened that Penelope was making one of her frequent calls to see the young protege when the grandfather dropped in. The boy's father, Jake, came bluntly to the point. "Pa, Miss Penelope says that D. Boone might get fixed up if we send him to one of those big city doctors out yonder. Me and Sarah's been talking it over, and we're might nigh on the notion But I aim to ask you afore we done anything. No. The grandfather spoke with one word, quietly, yet firmly. Penelope turned in amazement.
Why, Grandfather Tadlock, I was just sure you'd be so pleased. Everybody says D. Boone is your favorite grandchild. You'll let him have this chance, won't you?
No, ma'am, I'm against it. The old man's tone was courteous, but there was a ring of finality in it. It ain't nary a bit of use. I've told Jake and Sarah time and time again, they won't never raise this one. It's the good Lord's doing, and what is, will be. That's scripture. Some folks are predestined to have sorrow and trouble, and we ain't got no right to complain. Deeply hurt, Penelope turned to the parents for backing and a further appeal. Jake's face was a mask, and Sarah's eyes were duller, and her voice more plaintive than usual as she weakly yielded to the grandfather's authority. Yes, Paul, I reckon you're right. Folks in this day and time, the grandfather went on, is getting so tarnation smart, they reckon they can go square in the face of God Almighty, just like them people in the good book that tried to build that tower up to heaven so they could sit up there and laugh at God if he sent another flood. Penelope would have given up the fight had it not been for the appealing look of the little crippled boy who was gazing at her as they pondered his fate in their hands.
Grandfather Tadlock, when you're sick, you send for the doctor, and his child is just sick, and I'm almost sure that the doctors can cure him.
No, ma'am, this ain't no sickness. This boy was born that way, and if it's the Lord's will for him to grow stout, he'll get stout, and if it ain't, he won't. The case was settled, and that was clear enough. But every day or so, the busy schoolmistress of Dry Cove found time to drop in and chat and laugh for a while with the little shut-in boy. Daily, she came to comprehend the unconquerable courage of the lad, in whose fragile body beat a heart as stout and resolute as that of the pioneers that came before him. Daily, too, she came to realize how hopeless was her dream of winning for the child his one chance for restoration. The boy's mother, Sarah, was a true daughter of the mountains, and the blood of the old Indian fighters flowed through her veins. The boy's father, Jake, he had the heart of a pioneer and an adventurer, but the code of the mountains held fast in him. I've heeded the paw, he would say. The old ones know best, and I'll be a grandsire someday, and I expect mine to do as I tell them. Penelope, however, refused to abandon hope. She wrote the forbidden letter to the specialist, and a week later she had a reply. It offered encouragement, but she kept it to herself. Her own faith in the predestined schedule of mundane haps and mishaps allowed for a wee bit of diplomacy by way of helping Providence out in a pinch. And Penelope was a diplomat. She knew that none of the usual feminine ways of scheming, argument, tears, and flattery would avail. That's right. Grandpa Tadlock was woman-proof. So, like a good general then, she decided to storm the grandfather's frowning fortress, just where he himself believed it to be absolutely impregnable in the moated and bastion gate of his rock-ribbed theology. Through the schoolhouse window, Penelope saw the grandfather riding past on his horse. Immediately, she fudged a little bit on the last spelling lesson of the day, and she dismissed school early. She found the old man at Jake's house, and after a cheery greeting, she suddenly asked,
Grandpa Tadlock, do you know a minister by the name of Tucker?
Yes, ma'am, but he's a Methodist. There was obvious disparagement in the tone.
Well, he told me today that he was going to North Carolina to hold a revival on a Chattahoochee Creek.
You don't say. Well, I'm sorry, but I got a boy that lives up on the Chattahoochee.
Yes, I know that. And Brother Tucker told me he was going to look him up and try to get him interested in joining the Methodist meeting.
Well, that's what worries me, ma'am. Davy ain't well grounded and rooted in the faith, and I mistrust them Methodists. They're spreading their doctrines far and wide, and I'm uneasy that they'll get Davy's feet in the muddy clay.
That surely would be a pity,
declared Penelope sympathetically. Now, the truth is that Penelope was a Methodist herself, but that damning fact hadn't come to light yet in Dry Cove.
It certainly looks,
she went on soberly,
as though you might have a Methodist in your family soon.
The old man's eyes flashed with indignation. No, ma'am, I won't that. I tried to bring up my house in the ways of right, and I don't aim to see nary one of 'em turn out ornery,"
That's a noble spirit for a father to have.
replied Penelope encouragingly.
But I understand the Methodists are strong in Carolina.
"Well, you just leave it to me. Me and my wife will go over there and we'll stay till Davy gets his feet planted on the rock. And I don't care if it takes all winter." Jake and Sarah gasped at the sudden decision, and Penelope lent her full moral support.
You're exactly right, Grandpa. What is to be, will be, and I believe that myself.
The old man beamed upon her. "I'm proud you was raised up proper, Miss Penelope. Me and my wife is leaving tomorrow, and we'll stay there until corn planting time." The grandfather's leave with the crippling grandchild was, for him, unusually demonstrative. "D. Boone, your grandsire's going to be gone for a spell, and I hope you'll live and get stouter, if it's the Lord's will. And I'm going to bring your pretty back when I come back. Goodbye, honey." Two evenings later, Penelope was again at Jake's house. The child had already been put to bed in the back room to dream of racing on flying feet and chasing bears and panthers.
I keep thinking about the boy.
Penelope led off in a persuasive way that she had.
I'm convinced that the only thing getting in the way of him getting well is our failure to give him his chance.
"Oh, Miss Penelope," Sarah burst out passionately. "Ever since you named it, I kept a-pondering it in my mind. It seems like it ain't human to let him just go on dragging himself through life like a wild animal in a steel trap." "No, Sarah," Jake interrupted. "There ain't no use in going through all that no more. Paul's against it, and I ain't going contrary to him." Penelope saw that both parents were deeply stirred. Even Jake, dry-eyed and steady-voiced as he was, had an unwanted sadness in his face. There remained but one obstacle, but it was as real and as formidable as the granite rib mountain looming over the cabin. There was a moment of silence. The lamplight was set aflicker by the blaze of the logs on the hearth, and the creaking of an inner door caused all of them to turn. Through the crack of the door, the face of the child stared up at him. "Why, D. Boone, honey, where you going?" the mother chided. "We thought you was asleep an hour ago." "No, Mom, I heard Miss Penelope talking, and I wanted to hear what she was saying." A sudden inspiration came to Penelope.
Listen, Grandfather Tadlock is right. What is to be, will be. And I propose we leave it up to D. Boone to settle the question himself. What do you want to do, dear, about going to see the city doctor? You've heard us talking about it, I know.
Jake lifted the small child in his arms and brought him to the fireside. A light of surprise and understanding broke out in the boy's eyes. "Law, Miss Penelope, it's funny you ask me, but Lord knows I'd hate to go against Grandpap. But I sure do crave to get my legs fixed if there's any way they could be. And I'd work hard, and I'd pay you the money back." It was more than the mother could stand. She wept openly and unashamed. Jake was fighting in the He-Man fashion, but he was having a hard time of it. And finally he spoke. "That settles it. If he wants it that bad, I give in. No different to what Paul says." It was corn planting time when Grandpa Tadlock, having seen Davy safely immersed in the waters of the Cataloochee, they turned their faces back towards Dry Cove. And on the homeward journey, they stopped in Knoxville, where they made a mysterious purchase. It was something bulky, and it took 2 men to lift it in the burlap-lined crate. 2 days later, Luther Tadlock helped haul the crate to his father's house. The old man refused to satisfy everyone's idle curiosity on just exactly what it was. "It's just a doohickey to grind some smoke with," was all he'd say. The next day, the old couple came to Jake's house, riding the old farm wagon. The mysterious crate thing filled half the wagon bed. Jake came to the gate and he greeted the old folks and helped carry the crate to the porch. "Where's D. Boone?" the grandfather asked. "Why, Penelope came by in her Ford and took him for a ride. They'll be back directly." Well, that's good, Jake. I promised him a pretty when I come back, and I fetched it. We'll unwrap it afore he gets here. He'll open them big eyes of his when he sees it. Within minutes, Jake and Sarah, with Grandpa Tadlock, were gazing upon the polished wood, toughed upholstery, and the shiny metal fixtures of a thing whose likes had never been seen before in Dry Cove. There it was, the latest and most improved wheelchair. Why, Paul, what in creation? Jake gasped. What you got to say about that? The squire demanded with pride showing in his face. Well, it's the prettiest thing I've ever laid my eyes on before, Paul, exclaimed Sarah with the eagerness of a child. But, Paul, it's come too late to do D. Boone any good. The old man's face clouded with distress. Is that so, Sarah? Well, I'm awful sorry to hear it. I was hoping he'd get stout enough to roll himself about in it. But it's like I've told you. What is what will be, and we mustn't complain. We ain't complaining, Paul, answered Sarah, half frightened. In that moment, a shiny Ford coupe came to a stop at the gate. Seeing his favorite grandson sitting in the car, the grandfather ordered, Get out there, Jake, and tote the little one up to the house. Well, wait a minute, Paul, Jake answered quietly. The door of the car opened. And a small boy in knickers climbed out, a bit stiffly, and came walking with a slight limp up the steps. Howdy, Grandma and Grandpa, he shouted as he waved his hands towards his grandmother. The grandmother let out a yell and flopped limply into a chair. Oh, Lordy, she screamed. For the love of God, Sarah, am I seeing I hain't? Why, Granny, what ails you? Called the lad as he ran to her. It's me. Ain't you going to say howdy? Get away. Don't touch me. It gives me the all-overs. The old lady shouted hysterically. Geraldine, calm yourself, Grandpa Tadlock commanded. There ain't no sense in a female as old as you a talking that way. What's been going on here, Jake? What exactly has you and Sarah been and done? Jake stammered in embarrassment. He had dreaded this moment for months. Why, Paul, it was Miss Penelope. She asked the boy what he wanted to do. And he was so sot on going to the doctor that me and Sarah gave in. And he was gone 3 months. And when he came home, he could walk a teeny bit. And now, he's getting stouter every week. And up and gone the whole doggone day. And he's eating like a fattening hog. Paul, Sarah broke in, trembling and smiling at the same time. We sure hated to cross you, but we took a chance for him. Anyhow, you always said, what is to be will be. Miss Penelope said that too. The old man paused and took a plug of tobacco from his pocket and leisurely bit off a huge chew. Well, Jake, he said firmly, me and Miss Penelope was right, wasn't we? And I reckon we can trade this here wheelchair for a bicycle.